Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I into the top 10 for the team windows of opportunity. We have gone through teams 31 through teams 11. That's 20 teams if you're... Actually, it's 21 teams.
Damn it. Say, math is hard.
It's rough. So, yeah, as we head into the top 10, if you haven't listened to those episodes, they're good ones. Go back and check them out. Justin is the man with the list. I am the one with the categories, so I'm just over here ripping Justin's list apart. And in reality, he's the one who put in the hard work to make a list. I just tossed everybody into a couple boxes. So, so let's dive in. Let's go number 10.
Yeah, number 10 for me, the Vancouver Canucks, the Pacific Division leaders
The Cougar Nucks.
The Cougar Nucks, yeah. They are looking like they can compete for quite a while. While they may not be Stanley Cup contenders, they're away from a rebuild, and they're moving closer to contention every single day. And with the young group of forwards they have, I think their window to compete is going to be there for a while. And not only their forwards, but on the back end, you look at their goaltending. Man, Markstrom's looked good, but then they've also got Thatcher Demko and DiPietro in the back end.
Who's probably the best one out of all of them.
Yeah. So they look like they're going to be loaded, at both the back and the front for a long time. And, not to mention they've got Quentin Hughes on the back end, who they're going to obviously get signed next year to a long-term deal. And with he and Tyler Myers, and who knows, maybe Edler stays around for, another year or two after his deal's expired, and they're going to look pretty good on the back end. So,
yeah, I think when it comes to the Canucks, I think you look at their defense outside of Quentin Hughes, it's okay. Quentin Hughes has really wrote the ship for this team. As good as Elias Pettersson has been, it's really been having Quentin Hughes on that back end that has just changed everything for this team. I think he has 18 or 20. He has a ton of power play points, a ridiculous amount of them. And so just driving that entire team. Now, when I look at the way they're structured, Louis Eriksson, it's his $6 million is really, that's their kind of their whoopsie contract.
Sure.
All the rest of them are okay. Outside of maybe like a Brandon Sutter, but he's got 1 year left after this year. And, even an Antoine Roussel and Jay Beagle at $3 million apiece for 2 years after this season, it's not so bad. I think you could move one of those guys if you needed to. And they have Besser signed for the next 3 years. They've got Horvat signed for the next 4 and Miller for the next 4. You'll have to sign Pettersson, but not for another 2 years. This team surely can afford to sign somebody to a big 1 year deal and see what they can do.
A big 1 year deal. Okay. I like it.
I think it would be pretty interesting if they went out and, you go knocking down someone's door and you just say, look, we can give you $12 million. We can make you the highest paid player in the league for 1 year.
Ooh.
Just to draw someone in.
Never seen it happen, but I would love to see something like that actually happen.
It's like the NBA; they do it all the time.
Oh, of course,
you max out a guy just to bring him in for a year, and
do you bring in like a Taylor Hall, right?
Imagine if Taylor Hall came to Vancouver for 1 year,
dude. Pettersson and Besser on the same line, unreal. That would be crazy. Yeah. But let's be honest. With I think $18 million in cap space next year,
so probably about 20, 21, something like that. When all said and done?
Right. So the big question for me is Markstrom in goal, right? How much does he cost them? Because, again, we talked about
4 to 5.
I don't know. He's probably going to want maybe close to $6 million, $7 million. I don't know. But I think if you're Vancouver...
I tell him to lick my balls and sign a $4 million deal. He's not been that great. He's consistent. About 91 save percentage.
Yeah, he's been consistent.
He's a little over that this year.
I think if you're smart, right, you try to get him around $5 million for maybe 3 years, so you allow Demko and DiPietro to come in and maybe push him out when that contract's over and say, okay, cool, now we got 2 number ones here. Because let's face it, any really good team nowadays has 2 good, sure, 1A, 1B guys, and so I think maybe Vancouver would love to follow that model.
Yeah, and Demko is signed to a couple more years at $1 million. Season. So
and I think they'll get him at a reasonable rate when that's done because he's an RFA. So,
but if you're Markstrom, you're probably looking for 5 years.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
4 or 5.
I'm sure this is his last big contract, honestly. I mean, he's never proven outside of the last couple seasons with Vancouver he's, a legit starter. So I think now if you're Vancouver, when I don't think Demko or DiPietro are ready to take the number 1 spot, you have a little bit of leverage. Right?
I mean, how old was Carter
Hart?
Carter Hart
20,
when he was 20, right? And that's how old Michael DiPietro is right now.
Yeah. But up front, though, for me, this team, again, like I said, they're moving away from rebuild. They're ready to compete, and their window is only going to get larger because, again, their core group of guys like Quentin Hughes, Besser, Bo Horvat, Pettersson, they're all very, very young, and they're only getting better. So, to me, I think this is why this team cracks the top 10 for me.
Yeah, this team is still outside my top 10. The way that I would do a window, this team's window is. Like, to me, they have just become playoff contenders this year, and they need to make the playoffs first. It's just like Arizona, make the playoffs first. But I think this team's built for long-term success, whereas Arizona is probably going to be more of a one-off this year because of Taylor Hall and some of the other guys that they have signed right now. Whereas Vancouver, they're doing it the way that, I think we've traditionally seen. Their playoff window is going to open. They're going to make the playoffs. They'll probably make the playoffs for the next couple of years, and they'll try to win a round, and then they're going to try to win 2 rounds, and it'll be a slow build to Stanley Cup contender, which I think they will be in the next 2 or 3 years. I just think they have too many top 9 players, top 9 forwards in their top 6.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think that they'll right that ship as time goes on. Guys are going to want to come in and play with Pettersson, play with Besser. I mean, now especially Quentin Hughes, having him feeding you the puck. I think that you're going to see guys go back to Vancouver. Vancouver used to be a team that free agents always considered going to because it's such a nice city to live in.
It's beautiful. Yeah, been there once, loved it.
So I'd put Vancouver just outside of that Stanley Cup window. It has not quite opened yet.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, moving on. Number 9 for me, the Nashville Predators. Recently making a coaching change. We'll see how that pans out. But, this is the team that maybe might make a push for the playoffs. It's going to be very tough. They got a lot of teams.
I'm just surprised that you would put Nashville so much further ahead than like a Dallas.
Yeah, and I tell you why. Because I don't think this team is anywhere near flipping the switch to say we need to rebuild, right? I think they've got a lot of pieces, a lot of good forwards, a lot of good defensemen, goaltending that, for me, they can compete for years to come where eventually Dallas is going to have to replace guys and start rebuilding or.
Yeah, but just because you have players signed for a long time doesn't mean they're good players.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's been very many examples of that in the NHL. But
I mean, Ryan Johansson right now has 27 points.
Yeah,
he'll probably end up with maybe 50 at the end of the year.
I do think though that this is an instance like a one-off year where they're just all having their worst years, much like Calgary last year, where they all had their best statistical years ever and had a lot of success. But I think it's just the opposite here for Nashville. I think once they get a head coach in there that can put a system that works well for these guys, doesn't rely on defensemen always driving the play and goaltending saving their asses, I think now they can finally rely maybe more on the forwards to produce, where you've got Duchesne, Johansson, Forsberg, all signed to long-term deals. Maybe Kyle Turris finally snaps out of it and doesn't have to sit on the bench anymore. But, again...
What a brutal player that they brought in.
I feel bad for him, to be quite honest.
I feel like everybody has always overrated Kyle Turris. Always. They always see this guy who looks like he's got all sorts of talent, and he's never put it together. Ever.
I think because
other than a couple years in Ottawa.
Right. Well, I think that was the problem. He was so rated. I mean, he was so highly rated in Ottawa, and then had, that issue in Arizona where he kind of went diva with everything, and I think ever since then it's just...
Well, but I mean, he had those years where it was
better.
A little bit of his little thing in Arizona, but Arizona was a freaking mess.
It was at the time.
They didn't even
Absolutely.
have an owner.
No, I agree.
I mean, he goes into Ottawa and he puts up 57 points, 64 points. He gets his injury riddled season, so we won't count that one. And the next one's 55. Like he was chugging along fine. It's just they didn't want to sign him. They didn't have the money to sign him because they thought they were going to be able to sign Carlson. So they didn't sign him to a long-term deal. He goes to Nashville, and he just rapid decline. I mean, at least he'll probably end up with more points than he had last year.
All right.
He had 23 points in 55 games. Right now he has 19 in 41. So
yeah. So, but I mean, outside of the forwards, right? If they don't decide to go the scoring route, if they want to rely more on defense, a la a Dallas or Arizona type team, they've got Roman Josi, they've got Ryan Ellis, guys signed long-term deals.
Yep.
And then you look on the behind them in goal, Pekka Rinne, he's going to slip out after next season, and UC Saros, I have no doubt, will come in and be a very, very good number one goaltender for them. At 24, they're going to have to re-sign him, obviously, after next season. He'll get paid $4 or $5 million, I'm sure, and then, because Nashville's Nashville, and somehow they manage to always get guys to do team-friendly deals, sign for less money. Maybe Roman Josi finally broke the bank on that one and said, hey, I can actually get paid now.
Well, and even so, I think he could have gotten Erik Karlsson money anywhere else. So.
Yeah. And then again, too, I mean, this is a team, too, that has always had no problem turning out good prospects on the back end, too. So
yeah, they draft very well.
Yeah, they do. So I think the window is very large for this team. While they may not be Stanley Cup contenders right now, I think last year, the year before that, and I think, again, next year, they probably will be Stanley Cup contenders again.
Yeah, I have them as a team that has fallen from being a cup contender. They're a playoff contender right now, and that will not change until they make a major switch to their top six forwards.
Okay.
I think Ryan Johansson, Philip Forsberg, so one of these guys needs to be dealt. Victor Arvidsson, just find another team who also needs a little bit of a chemistry change and make that deal. They're not super overpay. I mean, with Ryan Johansson, you're probably going to have to eat some of the money.
Okay, let me ask you this. Here's a scenario.
Who did not take a team-friendly deal, by the way.
No, he did not.
He had $8 million a year.
So maybe you move a Ryan Johansson to bring back picks and you take a Phil Kessel. Do you think maybe that would be a deal? Because I know Arizona might be open to it. They've got Kyle Turris and Matt Duchene. They could ride those guys, as your 1-2 center punch, and maybe Phil Kessel comes in and can score you a few more goals.
You want your 1-2 center punch to be Kyle Turris?
I don't, but again, you say you have to move Johansson or a Philip Forsberg, right?
Sure.
You're not going to move Duchene.
Oh, well, you got to get rid of Kyle Turris before you do anything else.
Well, I think so too, absolutely. But if
he's
you
a part of the problem is that he's basically one of your top six forwards without being one.
I absolutely agree. He's got to go
one at least.
But if you're going to shake things up, obviously Ryan Johansson seems like the most likely candidate to go, in my opinion, which means you might want to just hang on to Kyle Turris a little bit longer. But because I don't think you move Philip Forsberg. I think right now it's $6 million. I'm hanging on to him as long as I can.
Yeah, he's a nice friendly deal there too. Okay, let's go to number 8.
Yes, number 8 for me is the Pittsburgh Penguins.
All right, we're finally into my actual contenders that are in here.
Yeah, this is the team, again, we know what they have up front. I mean, Crosby, Malkin, they've got so much talent on this team, and they just go out and they just recently re-signed Marcus Pettersson to a 5-year deal at $4.02 million. I don't know, maybe you might have overpaid a little bit because he's nothing more than a number 5 defenseman. Hopefully they don't do what a lot of teams do, and they try to slot him based on what he's being paid, because let's face it, he's not, in my opinion, not any better than a number 4, number 5 D guy. Hopefully they don't try to make him he's a top pairing guy.
He's a top 4 defenseman. He's just like that 3-4. Probably not really a 3, but
now you've got
a 4.
You've got Justin Schultz. Are you going to re-sign him now? Probably not.
Probably not. You're not probably not going to bring back Justin.
So you've still got Chris Letang. You've got Jack Johnson stuck in there still, and John Marino just looks phenomenal. I don't know where he came from, but he just came out of nowhere. And then
Dan gave birth to him.
Right.
When I look at this team, I say you have a 3-year window. You've got 3 years till Malkin, till he's a free agent, and my assumption is he leaves.
Really?
At that point, it would be my guess.
Goes back home to Russia, or
3 more
resigns?
years for Letang. Well, I mean, he'd be 36 by the time that contract runs out.
I still think he'll be competitive.
No, I'm not saying that he won't be competitive. I think that he probably, in those 3 years, you're probably going, okay, Malkin's 36, Crosby's 35, Letang's 35. The Penguins are going to be in
rebuild
in some kind of They'll be still a good team because they have those players, but he'll probably go, well, I could maybe go win a Stanley Cup. I could go sign in Florida and play with Barkov, who's now 27, 28, Huberdeau's 30. Like that team might be poised to do something special in 3 years. Maybe he goes and you think about all these teams that are up and coming. Maybe you go to Colorado. You say, I made my money. I'm going to go sign somewhere. I'm going to be a second line center. Well, he already is a second line center. Gosh.
Yeah, but for me, this team, they are a Stanley Cup contender, right? But their window's shrinking. That's why they maybe aren't a little bit higher, where some people can look at this team and say they're always competing. What's kind of keeping them in it, though, is they still have a lot of good young players coming up. And more importantly, they got good young guys in goal, right? They've got Matt Murray, Tristan Jarry. They've got some quality guys to fill in that net.
They have good players coming up to complement Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Letang. But as soon as those guys are done, I don't care who you have coming up.
No, absolutely.
Sorry, you're all going to go. So yeah, Pittsburgh. I think their window's still wide open, but they have a clear expiration date. Like where some of these teams, it's kind of like, well, yeah, if that player falls off a little bit, then yeah, they'll be in trouble, but maybe he won't. Whereas for Pittsburgh, it's like, all right, Malkin, Crosby, Letang, 35 plus. They won't be a Stanley Cup contender. They might be a playoff contender still. They won't be a Stanley Cup contender.
Okay, love it.
Number 7.
Number 7 for me, the Washington Capitals. A team who very well, in my opinion, is probably in my top 2-3 picks to win the Cup right now. But I think their window is much like the Pittsburgh Penguins, where it is getting smaller because I think it's bigger than Pittsburgh's, but I think it's starting to shrink on them. Right, because you look at their core group of forwards, because they rely heavily on these guys up front. They don't have much outside of Karlsson on the back end. Holtby's going to obviously leave after this season. They don't have the money to re-sign him because you look at Nicholas Backstrom, right? He's going to make $9.2 million.
Well, and I don't think you're too worried. Ilya Samsonov has played fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So
he'll be
really
your number one without a doubt next year. And I don't think that bothers Capitals fans at all. But again,
it just kind of it's one of those. Hey, he's a free agent. He's going to get paid a ton of money, and there's no point in paying somebody a ton of money when you have somebody who's making an entry-level deal.
Right. Exactly, because they've got a lot of guys up front signed to long-term deals, and they're starting to age a little bit, right? They're not super old yet. They're not like,
well, they're not slowing down.
But yeah, they're not slowing down. But, I mean, a guy like Nicholas Backstrom, who's 32 years old, at $9.2 million, does that deal start to hurt you on those last few years? Same thing with a guy like TJ Oshie, who he's 33 and he's going to start slowing down eventually.
They just have such cerebral players.
They really do.
That I would say I look at this team and I'm not worried about anyone on here. Honestly, the guy that I'm most worried about isn't any of those guys in their 30s. It's Tom Wilson.
Really,
the way he plays.
Yeah,
2-3 years from now, you look at that and you go, well, he'll be making $5.1 million when you need to possibly re-sign some guys later on. That contract might not look great.
Yeah, the other big concern for me is Jacob Vrana, right? You look at a guy who's put up 42 points in 50 games, and he only gets maybe 20 seconds of power play time a game. Right. So it's all even strength, 23 goals. He's going to be in an RFA, which is great for them, but he's going to probably want $70 million.
Yeah.
So can you afford
that's in 2 years.
Yeah.
So that number might be
even higher.
7.5, might be 7.8. And at that point, you're probably you've got to try to move somebody. First off, you've got Ovechkin, who will need to be re-signed. Now,
I think he'll take a team discount.
Leans on that. Let's say Ovechkin decides to just hang it up or go play somewhere else. Well, then Washington's window I wouldn't say that he is, without Ovechkin, this team's just they're going to fall and crap their pants. But I also don't think they're Stanley Cup contenders anymore. There's something about him.
He's the driver in that bus. Regardless if he's producing, he's the driver.
I think that he could probably go, and especially in 2 years. I think that it'll probably would be more seamless than you think. He could leave. You could replace his production in some way in 2 years. Right now, maybe you can't. At some point, I'm just assuming that he's a human and he's going to slow down.
I don't think so. I think, honestly, he wants Gretzky's goal-scoring record, and I think he's going to continue to chase it in Washington as long as they'll have him. But I think the money is going to start to become an issue when you have guys like Vrana and, maybe maybe you can convince Ovi to say, hey, can you take $6 million?
He needs 8 more goals to get to 700.
That's crazy.
The last guy to score 700 goals, do you know who it was?
Brett Hull?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. And it took him forever to get 700.
Right.
It was funny.
Yeah, 890.
And he scored 700, his like classic one-timer from the slot or from the circle on the slap shot where he goes down to his knee. That's,
oh boy.
Like you want to see Ovechkin score on the power play from his side on the one time. Like I want to see the same thing for him as I did Brett Hull.
Good.
Okay. I agree. Capitals, Penguins, pretty lock and step in terms of a 3-year window. I think that's probably pretty accurate. Although I actually think the Penguins or the Capitals are better set up to absorb the loss of their superstars because they still have Evgeny Kuznetsov. They still have some guys who are a little bit younger, whereas Pittsburgh doesn't have, like, it's basically Jake Getzel is their one young guy who is not, he's not in his 30s yet. Whereas Washington actually does have, they've got Tom Wilson, Vrana, Kuznetsov. They have some guys who in a couple years will still be young enough to be a part of maybe the next iteration of the Washington Capitals, along with Ilya Samsonov. To number six.
The Carolina Hurricanes for me. This is a team.
Wow, you have them high.
I do have them high, and because I'm very high on what these guys can do moving forward. They look better and better to me ever since Brendan Moore took over this team. They're exciting to watch, and their core group of guys are very young. Right? You look at Sebastian Aho, 22 years old. Timo Teravainen, 25 years old. We look on the back end, right? Jacob Slavin, only 25. Brett Pesce, 25 years old. Very, very young, right? They're core, and they're all signed for 3 years.
Not to mention like the guys who are signed to, like Jake Gardner signed to a nice deal. You've got Joel. Guys want to come there. I think
absolutely.
And it's starting to become a destination spot. North Carolina is a really nice place to live too. But
without a doubt, and they play a style hockey. They're one of those teams, right? My favorite thing about them is they get up 2-0. They don't just go into trap mode and just sit back and try to defend you. Now they still attack, right? Not to mention they've got a young budding superstar potential, the next Vladimir Tarasenko and Andrei Svechnikov. Yep. He's going to only get better. My only concern for them long term, and while I think maybe could potentially hurt their window of opportunity, is goaltending, right? Mrazek's looked fine this season. I like what he's doing, but can he keep it up? He's been so up and down throughout his career. Which Mrazek are we going to get? Is he going to come back down? Is he going to continue to be a productive goaltender? Hopefully. For their sakes, he will. But, I mean, him and James Reimer, they're only there for this season and next. And I think it'll be an okay tandem, but after that, they've got to figure it out. They've got what's-his-face in the minors, Alex Needlevik, or, man.
Alex Needledick? I think that's what you meant to say.
No.
Nedeljkovic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm terrible with pronunciation.
And Anton Forsberg, who's not the worst, but...
he's an okay number 3, sure.
Carolina might not even make the playoffs this year.
They do lack a little bit in scoring this year, and which is kind of surprising, as much as they like to attack teams. But you know what? They've got a bevy of defensemen, right? They've got Jake Bean in the minors. They've got Roland McKeon.
There's a reason he's in the minors.
Well, because they're so stacked up front.
He's 21. He's 21 years old. But you do have Dougie Hamilton who's hurt too. That's not helping them at all right now.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, when you lose your number one defenseman, that hurts no matter what. But, I mean, they've got guys like Trevor Van Riemsdyk and Joel Edmondson that are going to be free agents, and they're probably going to let walk. But, hey, they've got cap space to burn next season. They're going to have $19 million, so they can go out and make a move to maybe go in and bring out, sign a guy like, maybe a Torrey Krug. Maybe they go bring him, or Tyson Berry in.
It wouldn't be too far of a move.
Yeah.
For Krug.
And then now you've got a legit, top, 2 top pairings on the back end and guys that can drive play. But to me, I think, their window is wide open because their core group of guys, both on the back end and up front, are so young. They've got just an exciting team, and they're starting to feel it.
If I'm Carolina, you know who I go after if he's not re-signing is Jake Muzzin.
Oh, Muzzin, really?
I'm throwing Muzzin Muzzin and Gardner together again, and
that's interesting.
And let the good times roll.
I thought you were going to say Pietrangelo because they brought in Falk to basically replace him. When they signed him, kind of like a little stat. But anyways, I'll tell you,
I would have Carolina much farther back. Like they are moving into that Stanley Cup contender window, but I still think they're playoff contenders. Whereas if they make the playoffs this year, win another round, they have some success again. Probably they move in next year. They have to be considered Stanley Cup contenders. If you're winning rounds 2 years in a row and you don't lose anybody, you're a playoff. You're a Stanley Cup contender.
Okay.
Into the top five.
Top five. All right. Well, at number 5 for me, the Winnipeg Jets.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a team that I've always been pretty high on for the last few seasons, and that's mostly because I love Connor Hellebuyck. But you look at the guys they have up front, right? They've got veterans who are still in their prime. You know, you look at Blake Wheeler. Yeah, he's getting a little bit older. You know, maybe he's like a Brad Marchand where he's only got a few really good productive years left because, again, he's a hard player, right? He goes hard, he plays fast. But then they've got a lot of really good pieces that are super young up front. Patrick Laine, Kyle Connor. These are 30 goal scorers each.
They have a really nice balance of age.
Yes.
Like,
absolutely.
yes, one guy could leave, but they have people coming.
Yes, absolutely. Now, my only concern for this team and concern longer term is defense, right? Joshua Morrissey, he's going to be fine. I like him even if you have to put him...
He's a good top four defenseman.
Absolutely, but they need a real number one. They need a real number one guy there.
And a number 3, and a number 4.
Well, I think they can address those concerns. I think this offseason because Dmitry Kulikov's coming off his contract. His $4 million will be gone, so they'll have some money to maybe go out and try to address a top 4 defenseman. Maybe get like a Jake Muzzin in there for $5-6 million bucks.
Who by the way did just say he wants to re-sign in Toronto.
He does absolutely, and I don't blame him. I mean, who wouldn't want to play with Austin Matthews? That's the other concern too. Is if you get this guy back, now you've got your number one back, and that's like, to me, that's bigger than any trade deadline move they could make to fill in a spot on the back end. So outside of that concern, you've got Connor Hellebuyck signed long term. You've got a good group of young forwards. They are signed long term as well. So I don't think there's really any concern. I think their window is still wide open. I still think Paul Maurice is a very good coach. Gets a lot. I mean, if you lose your top 2 defensemen and you're still able to put yourself in contention for a playoff spot, that's pretty freaking good. And honestly, you don't really have a number 2 center. You're using your number, 1 right winger to play center on the second line right now. So
I'm going to say that their Stanley Cup contender window has closed.
Ouch.
It is like they're a team last year. I'm pretty confident I said it. I thought that last year was like they need to win it or like do something significant here because it may be their last shot at it. Not knowing Byfuglien would be gone.
Okay.
Now Byfuglien might be gone. Like that just starts to close the door more quickly, especially on this season. And to me, the Jets are. I just don't see it. I think they have to completely retool their defense. And yes, you can sign guys, but we have not seen an overabundance of desire of guys to go to Winnipeg and sign and play there long term, except for the guys who have played there. They like it and they stay.
Sure.
But the only way to do that is to trade for a guy and get them to stay. Thank goodness they didn't keep Kevin Hayes.
Oh, good.
Sign him to $7 million or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been rough. But to me, I think
they didn't do that.
This is a team who I think the minute if they get in the playoffs, you might as well consider them a contender to me because I think nobody in the West outside of maybe, St. Louis and Colorado really scare me.
What if they make the playoffs and Byfuglien goes, okay, I'll come back. I'll play the playoffs.
I mean, hey.
You play for free in the playoffs.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, but that's why they come in at number 5. They're not really ready for rebuild yet. They're still a contender, in my opinion. So,
okay. Number 4.
Number 4 is the St. Louis Blues.
All right. Defending Stanley Cup champion.
The defending champs.
Third in the league in points right now.
Yeah. Again, this is a team to me that is going to be my favorite in the West to win right now. But the bigger concern long term and why their window may be shrinking is because, one, they're running out of cap money. Next year they've only got $7 million in cap space, and they're trying to sign Pietrangelo. Whether or not they're going to be able to do that is a whole other story, because, again, they've got, younger guys, Sammy Bias, that are going to need new contracts. But after that year, next year, they've got a bunch of free agents up front. Jaden Swartz is going to need a new contract. Alexander Steen, he'll be 36, 37, so you probably let him walk, or you get him to a really cheap contract. Tyler Bozak, his contract will run up. They'll probably let him walk at that point, I would think. But
that's why, I really like the way that this team's constructed, because when you look at it, the guys whose contracts are going to run out, I'm going to say this with I'm about 95% confident Pietrangelo resigns in St. Louis.
That's
I'm really
way higher than me. I'm 50-50 right now.
I'm really not worried that he's going to resign. They're going to work something out. They might be looking at it and going, hey, we actually, according to league rules right now, we can't sign you to an extension when they can see we have this, I don't know what the rules are for extensions, and heading into the next offseason, you have a certain amount of dollars available based on
you can go 10% over the cap
in the offseason.
In the offseason, right.
But I don't know if they can sign him to an extension when all they can look at right now, if you look at Cap Friendly, next year it says they have $7.7 million in cap space next year. Can they sign him to a deal worth more than that if they don't have it available? They may need to wait for the offseason to get that 10% bump, be able to re-sign him, and then they can work out the rest.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't really know that either, but
they can figure that out. Now they're also there's guys that this team could easily move. Headed into next season, I think if you needed to, you could trade Alexander Steen. You could trade Tyler Bozak with 1 year left on their deal. You could probably find a home for a Carl Gunnarsson's not paying anything. You might be able to find a place for Jake Allen if you're willing to take half his salary. There's plenty that you can do to make sure that you can sign Pietrangelo, which to me says they have 2 years of a window at least. Beyond that, yeah, you lose Steen. You could probably re-sign Schwartz if you really wanted to at the end of that, because in 2021-22, according to this, they've got about $40 million in cap space. Now, some of that will need to go towards Binnington. It'll need to go towards Schwartz, and it'll need to go towards Pietrangelo. But let's say they have $25 million in cap space at that point. With aging veterans leaving the organization, they can bring in some younger guys. They may need to retool, but I think this team is a team that has a very long window based on the way they're constructed.
They could, but then they also
5 years at least.
Okay,
for a Stanley Cup
they
win.
could, but then they also make a few wrong moves, and now your window to me is very, very small, because again, Pietrangelo, maybe say he doesn't resign, maybe say he wants $8-9 million, and they don't have the money to do that, so they let him walk.
That's what he's going to get.
Well, I know that, but I'm just saying.
He's going to get $9 million.
Maybe
he might get 10.5.
Okay, maybe St. Louis doesn't make the moves to get him in that cap space he's looking for, and so they let him walk. Right now, to me, Justin Falk is fine, but is he your number one guy? No, I don't think so. Now you have to rely on Colton Parayko, which is fine, but then he's going to want more money down the road. What if Jordan Binnington? You can't re-sign him. What if he wants way too much money?
But there's a lot of money here.
I understand there's a lot of money.
They've got lots of money coming up.
But what if they're not willing to spend it? Or what if they...
But they've proven that they're willing to spend all the way to the cap. All the time.
I'm just saying, what if some of these guys price themselves out of this team?
You could.
And so now your window is it's gone from 4 or 5 years down to, maybe these 2 years they really, really have this year and next before a lot of these free agents are up for new deals.
I'll talk to you in 5 years. Let's go to number 3.
Number 3 for me is your favorite team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah, they come in at number 3 for me because of one reason. I honestly wanted to put them higher on this list, but because they have a forward group that is so flipping expensive,
yeah.
It could hurt them, in the latter years of those contract deals where, maybe they need some money. Like, for example, next year they're going to need some money to re-sign some defensemen. Eventually, Freddie Anderson's going to need a new deal. Can you get him dirt cheap again, or do you have to just go out and find somebody else? Or maybe, because I don't see anybody in their pipeline for goaltending that really excites me that I could say, okay, this is a guy who could take over.
They have one forward over the age of 29, and it's Jason Spezza.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very young team.
And then Muzzin is 30 years old. and he's the only guy over 30 on their defense.
Yeah, very, very young, which is why I really like their window. I think it's very large, but you've got to figure out a couple things on the back end defensively and goaltending-wise.
Well, you've got Rasmus Sandin, and then you have all of a sudden
great.
Justin Hall. It looks unbelievable. He's like a top 4 defenseman who comes out of nowhere, and then Timothy Liljegren will come in and be another top 4.
And I'm hoping that works out for them.
I think
really
that they at least have a very reasonable plan in place, like 2 first-round draft picks who will come up and be defensemen. That's pretty good. And Rasmus Sandin he scored his first goal last night too. So.
Yeah, pretty good.
But yeah, I mean, and this team is they're primed. I mean, I think you look at 11.6 for Matthews. That's right. Like nobody's batting an eye. Like yes, it's a lot of money, but
he's going to be a Rocket Richard
anyway.
contender every year.
John Tavares, $11 million. You can deal with that. Marner, overpaid. Nylander, underpaid. Let's meet them in the middle. $8.5 million for both of them. I think I'd be pretty comfortable with $8.5
Sure, but do
for
you
both
need all those forwards signed up? You need that many forwards.
Why not?
You know, it's
what you
kind of
have.
hurt Chicago.
It's what you have.
Well, I know it's what you have, but it's kind of hampered Chicago trying to keep contending because they.
But that was just because they were older and they stopped producing. Like Taves stopped producing, and so his $10.5 million looked awful because he was producing like he was a $3 million player.
Right. I completely agree, but
I don't disagree.
If you can't keep the puck out of the net either, that's the other big concern with Toronto. Freddie Anderson's doing everything he can, and so maybe after next season when he's a UFA, he's say, "Oh crap, I don't want to deal with this anymore." I don't want to deal with 50 shots a night. So
50 shots a night.
I mean, that's unrealistic, but maybe he goes somewhere where he can have a little bit more of a defensive system in front of him. But to me, I'm
Ian Scott on his way up.
Stop it.
He was he led everybody in everything goaltending wise.
Yeah. Well, I'm very optimistic though on their back end that a lot of these younger pieces are going to continue to grow. But you got to wait 2-3 years before I think maybe all these guys will be ready and in their prime and to say, hey, we're Stanley Cup defensemen. But then again too, you can look at a team like Pittsburgh that just said we took crappy defensemen and won anyway. So
sure. Yeah, I don't disagree. That's actually exactly where I put them in terms of like the length of window. I have them at a 5 to 7 year window for Stanley Cup contention. 7 years down the road, Tavares is 36, but even then, if you have all the rest of your guys, you're still probably competing for a cup. So their window's wide open. Okay, let's go to number 2.
Number dos, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
All right.
Yeah, for me, they've got a lot of very, very good pieces signed long-term. Victor Hedman, Ryan McDonough, Kucherov, Stamkos, Braden Point. All these guys have, 2 or 3 years left after this season, if not more. But granted, they are getting a little bit older, but their window is freaking wide open as far as I'm concerned. 5
to 6 more years.
Yeah, it's freaking huge.
Easily.
Yeah, and you've got, Vasilevsky signed long-term. Now, hopefully that doesn't turn into a Bobrovsky situation where he starts crapping the bed at some point. I don't think that'll ever happen, with what they have. Sure. But who knows?
And they're still paying Vincent Lecavalier money.
I know, which is just
doesn't
funny.
count towards the cap, but they're still paying him money.
Paying him.
Every year, I think, until 2029.
Wow.
He gets paid every year 20 years or something like that. That's crazy. Yeah, I don't think there's any arguing. They're set. They're in a great position, even though they struggled mightily early on. Now they go, okay, we need to start playing again, and boom,
rope-a-dope people.
Away they go.
Yeah, and then they always draft well too, and which I think long-term wise they'll find more diamonds in the rough. And
they always drafted well with Yzerman. Yes,
with Yzerman. Yeah, so, there you go. Thank you, Red Wings. So obviously number 1 is the only team left, and that is the Colorado Avalanche. Yeah. I don't think there's any denying the young group of people they have and how good they're going to be for a very long time. Now, the bigger question is, can they keep them all signed, for a long time?
I mean, I think the difference between and why we like the Avalanche's setup better right now in this moment is because of how good Cale Makar looks. 2 years ago, we might not have said this about the Avalanche. We would have said that they had looked like they were going to come into their own. But Cale Makar gets drafted. He's unreal. He plays so well with Sam Girard, too, who signed a real nice $5 million deal for like the next 7 years. So
it's looking real good.
6 years.
And they've got Brian Bowen coming up. He's going to be freaking good.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, they drafted him.
Bowen Byram.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Bon, BB. They're, and the fact that Nathan McKinnon, probably top 5 player in the league, is signed to $6.3 million a year. The only guy with a better deal is Barkov.
There you go.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's and it'll be interesting to see, though. What we don't know about the Leafs is how does Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren pan out. If they both pan out and become number 1, number 2 defensemen, suddenly the list might change. But because the Avalanche are so balanced, like they have the goaltender, which the Leafs and them, but they have Leafs and Colorado both have the forwards. It's the defense where you like Colorado's better.
Right, I'm more optimistic about it.
And I don't disagree. It just depends on what those guys pan out to be.
Sure, absolutely. And I think both of them, when you look past the goaltending in goal, or past the defense in goal, right, they're both going to be needing new goaltenders in 2 years. So, can they
sign guys?
Yeah, do they re-sign the guys they have, or do they got to go looking elsewhere? So that might be another concern. But
I really would like to see a Colorado-Toronto final.
Oh my gosh, that'd be great. That would be so good.
And it would prove everything we've done here the last 2 weeks that we were right. Colorado and Toronto are good. All right, well, there it is. The top 10. If you didn't hear the previous 21 teams talked about, go back and listen to those. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the week with hockey. We'll see you guys next week when we... who knows what we're doing next week? We haven't come there yet. So if you have any ideas for some other shows, let us know. We always like audience feedback. Hit us up on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Talk to you guys soon.